Well, hello everybody, and thank you very much for those of you who stayed with us, particularly having lost your coffee break. In a sense, we are interlopers here. We're at GovSatcom. It says GovSatcom everywhere, but we're going to talk about EO. And I was very pleased when Sarah Casanova a few minutes ago from Airbus talked about how do we bring those two together? How do we conflate EO and communications? I'm not sure I have an answer to that yet, but we must remember that space is not just about communications, and I hope by saying that in this room, I've not created heresy. What I'm going to do first is let the panelists, and that includes me, because although I'm the moderator, I'm sort of a panelist as well, and I'll explain why in a moment, but talk about a little bit about who they are, what they do, and what their capability is, and that's for the two of the people here. The other, Laryssa, is a receiver, a user, an end customer, and therefore absolutely critical in what we're doing. If we don't provide to them, then we're not doing the right thing. So as you heard at the beginning, I'm Pete Round. I am the Vice President Business Development for Defence and Intelligence for Earth Daily, and our buzzword is everywhere, every day. So global coverage of the whole planet, including sea areas, including the littoral, all the land masses, and then take that massive amount of data, 21, 25 terabytes of data, depending on the day, and use AI and machine learning to detect change. This is new, there's nothing quite like it, and we're very proud of what we do. But let's move on and hear from the others and their capabilities, and then we'll move into the meat of the session. Laryssa first as the customer.
Thank you, Peter. My name is Laryssa Patten. I think this is my third or fourth time speaking here. I'm always happy to come and share the perspective of the user. I am the head of the Space Technology Adoption and Resilience team at NCIA agency. We are the NATO agency that provides the systems for NATO missions and operators to use. I am also the program manager of a new program that is quite innovative, and maybe you have heard of it. It's called Alliance Persistent Surveillance from Space, and it combines the nation's Earth observation satellites together with commercial capabilities in order to deliver timely, relevant intelligence to the operator using space-based services and space-based analytics. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope we have a good chat.
Thank you. I'm Rupert Grinling of Planet.
Thank you, Peter. I'm Rupert Grinling from Planet Labs. I joined Planet about 7 months ago now, so I'm sure I'll get at least 50% of what I'm talking about right. Planet does two complementary but distinct services. Firstly, we capture the entire of the Earth's landmass on a daily basis through medium resolution scanning, so small skysats in a polar orbit going around the Earth. And then we also complement that by a high resolution capture service as well. And that's about it.
Okay, thanks very much. Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Jonathan, based out of Belgium, working now with Blacksky for a big part of Europe. Blacksky, as you might know, is a US-based company. We're providing real-time intelligence from space. So basically that our end users can monitor specific locations, specific events, but also specific objects. Currently we're doing that because we own and operate our own constellation of satellites. Latency, 90 minutes currently, and we have also a very high revisit rate. But just 2 weeks ago, we launched our next generation of satellite. Generation 3 is what it's called, which will bring us down to 35 centimeter, but perhaps more importantly, it will bring also, it will change the latency, basically from tasking a satellite to delivering it, including analytics, to 10 minutes. So that's what Blacksky is doing.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you heard that, 10 minutes, what a difference. But what you've got here is some competitors, some users, so hopefully we'll get a lively conversation. I meant to point out in the introduction, by the way, and I'm quite proud of this, I count as a veteran of GovSatcom, and that I was at the first one as Capability Director of the European Defence Agency, and my, how it's grown, what a fantastic job. And I want to pass my thanks to the organisers, particularly Mel for doing that and for having us. Anyway, to business. So the first question then is here we are, Earth observation from threats to trends. And you can interpret the title to this question in two ways. The first, what are the threats to the space infrastructure, that's the space and the ground segments that you see now, and what trends do you think are developing as a result? And secondly, what are the threats that you perceive need answering by space? And again, what are the trends that are developing as a result of that? And what we'll do is we'll go from the far end back, and we'll put Jonathan on the spot first. Away you go.
Thank you, Peter. So I think from our perspective, what we like to do is look at what does the end user want. So Blacksky has always been looking at having a close relationship with the end user, so we understand current capabilities, but also future capabilities. And what we have seen in the past 3 years, and by the way, my first GovSatcom was 24th of February 22, so that's 3 years ago now, and I still remember it for two main reasons. First of all, I woke up in a hotel receiving two kind of messages. First of all, happy birthday, because 24th is my birthday, but second of all, okay, did Russia just invade Ukraine? So it's interesting to see how things have shifted in the past 3 years, and I think one of the key elements we saw this morning is that commercial satellite imagery is now the standard. It's being used throughout different conflicts. And what we are seeing right now with end users is they want to have the data, as I think it was in the Airbus keynote, to have the data at the specific moment when they need it. And I think that's what Blacksky is doing now with those 10 minutes. It used to be, I would say, a very strategic asset, a satellite, and now that is shifting. So we're looking now, with those 10 minutes, we're looking to have an impact not only at the strategic level, but also at the operational and the tactical level. So I think from our side, speed will be crucial. And also on top of that, it will be the analytics and the connectivity, so we can integrate it in the workflows of the end user very easily.
Okay, thanks very much. I have a supplementary from there, but let's move first to Rupert and let him do his bit, and I'll come back to you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to briefly touch on trends. I think we'll continue to obviously gather large amounts of data from the Earth by space-based ISR, and for that you'll continue to need to develop automation in processing and analysing that data. So I see that trends will continue to lift almost space-based ISR out of the realms of the traditional J2 hub and into probably J3, J5 planning and operations. And I think for that, yeah, you need that interconnectivity with AI. You need to be able to move data around the place, but also that's going to curtail the targeting cycle, because if you can automate your collection and analysis, you are probably going to bypass the need for user requirements coming into that collection as well. So you might see a self-contained intelligence collection cycle feeding into operations and planning with a human on the loop rather than in the loop.
Okay, Stacey, you're the Laryssa, sorry, you're the endpoint of this. What are the things you want us to do? What are those trends that we should be thinking about?
So I want to frame my answer in two parts, the technology trends and the business trends, because I think the two are important to identify in a separate way. The technology trends of the constellations, the available unclassified sensors of infrared, SAR, EO at high resolution, these are all great. And mixing those with constellations, allowing the revisit time and allowing the delivery of the data at the pace of relevance is really important. Combining that with artificial intelligence so that the question is already being answered in terms of intelligence as opposed to just delivering data is the trend that is very interesting, because that is allowing more of this data that you spoke about to be used and to go through. And you don't need to continuously take a picture of a certain site to know that something has changed. You can just be told when it's changed, which allows us to put resources on analysts in a more effective way. So that's the technology trend. The business side is also very interesting, because every part of the value chain now can become its own service. So the idea of intelligence as a service using space-based products, space-based technologies is really interesting. And I think in 2005, NATO owned its last satellite. And there's a lot of humming and hawing, was that the right decision? But today, we can use intelligence as a service from the space provider. And that is quite interesting in terms of a business trend. That being said, it is met with a lot of challenges in terms of how do you work with a commercial entity to give potentially classified or sensitive information. So that is a hurdle that needs to be solved. But in terms of trends, technology trend, business trend, and then the final hurdle is the three things I would bring up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. So can I come straight back to you, Laryssa, with a question? What thought and work are you doing as we need to reduce the loads on the analysts? It's not just we need to reduce the load on the analysts. We can't, with so much data, it's not possible for the analysts to deal with it all. So we've got to find a way of dealing with it in an automated way. And you talked about AI. But how are you thinking as a provider of the taker and then provider to the ground force or to any user who wants it, an AI-created product, as to know you can trust that AI? Have you started to think about what checks and balances you can put in place when you can't possibly have a human checking the homework?
So the culture change required in the intelligence community is significant. And one of the ways we do it is the first commercial provider of data to APSS. We've tried to work together with the provider in order to have the two teams, the commercial team and the intelligence team, understand where each technology is coming from and where their analysis is coming from. And that helps build trust. But that will take time, and culture change takes time. And also there is a need to understand that some targets are not needed to be classified. Also, a question needs to be asked at the policy level: what is classified and at what phase? In conflict, in crisis, different things will be classified and others will not. So that discussion has to take place within NATO, but the best thing that we do is we include the commercial provider. And I would like to see our contracts change to be more than fire and forget, but to be a standard ongoing relationship between industry and NATO, because it allows NATO to get smarter, and it allows industry to adapt and deliver products that are needed by NATO at the very moment. Otherwise, fire and forget contracts are just sustaining engineering contracts. They don't allow for that adaptation. Yeah. And the adaptation is really important, and the relationship with industry is critical, and that's what allows us to succeed. It allows us to make the culture change. It allows industry to adapt to how NATO works, because it's not always intuitive, and it allows the warfighter to understand where industry is coming from and what can and cannot be trusted.
I muse, actually, whether the increase in use of AI and the setting the parameters and training of the AI is the moment where we can get better control of levels of classification, which tend, with human operators, to get pushed up in the pursuit of being safe in the classification they set. But Jonathan, do you want to talk to us about
perhaps
AI?
because indeed there's the business question as well, and if we look at different programs that Blacksky is doing right now, for example, for the US government, so we had this morning with a general who was speaking about TAC SRT, so that's one way how you can work around having very specific demands from in-theater operations, and then have a very quick turnaround on that question, and then delivering a very specific solution for the end user. So I think that's one part, how you can look at it. And then the other one, and I'm very glad to hear that it's not fire and forget, but we have been doing with the US government the EIM program. So it's economic indicator monitoring, basically, and where we are monitoring very specific ports and airfields. And the client was not even interested into seeing the real data. So not the imagery, no, just the analytics on top of it. And that was a contract in the last 2 years, and now that has evolved into what they call Luno A and Luno B, which we've been selected as a prime among, I would say, 9 other primes. And that's how we can work together between having a real analytical product or a real intelligence product. So it exists already, and we're already executing on it, and I assume it will even grow further into NATO, but also in Europe. I think that's a big trend.
Okay. Rupert, do you want to...
I think the only thing that I'd add is that there's a risk-reward thing of using AI, because if you can capture the entire of the world's landmass on a daily basis, you're not going to employ 15,000 analysts to look at every square inch. You need to use the advantage of AI to let you know or indicate where there's been change or where there's something that you want to look at. And I would argue that the level of technology at the moment is probably secure enough or has high enough fidelity in order for you to at least trust that it's going to point out a valuable change. And the risk of not using it when you're collecting large data sets is probably too high. I think we're already in the position where we must utilize AI to point out those changes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Certainly the size of the data set is one of the biggest challenges here. Okay, we've heard a couple of words already about contracts and how things are set up. So I've got another question for all of you, and it's this. We see challenging times for space companies, although there's lots of optimism about everybody needing space. What's going on at the world is creating an even bigger demand signal, and we've heard governments talking about more spending, particularly in the defense arena. Nevertheless, we know that there are challenging times around in the here and now, and some well-known names, including ones that originated here in Luxembourg, are finding their way, and not always positively, into the financial pages. So how can commercial space persuade banks and governments that it's a safe bet for investments, and to persuade governments that they are safe suppliers? In other words, the commercial space is the place to be. We hear stories, and it depends on the country, but we hear stories where any small, medium-sized business is even finding it difficult to get banking services if they're associated with defense because of the rules that we see in the financial sector. But it's challenging times, and companies, space companies, need to prove that they're solid bets. And I just wonder some thoughts on how they might do that. So, Rupert, do you want to have a first stab at that?
Thank you very much. I can really only speak about this as a account executive from Planet selling into governments and defence, but I think the key thing here is probably 2 points. The first one is that space isn't just about the segment you're working in. So for Planet, it's not just about defence, it's about CivGov and the charity sector and sort of normal acquisition of space data. So as well as, I guess, thinking about your own segment and where you're looking at, think about what are the broader utilities of your products. So algorithms that we've trained for CivGov, like looking at roads and building detection, have been superb at identifying Ukrainian trench systems in the Crimea or, I guess, missile silos being opened and such like. So there is a complementary aspect that probably some people or people may overlook. And then I think the second part is that it's a team game, or at least from my perspective, it's a team game. Planet would not be able to exploit the huge amounts of data that we collect on a daily basis without a cohort of trusted partners that exploit our data on our behalf and work with us. So I think, it's a very new sector. We're still finding our feet, but you have to think broader than perhaps you would do in a traditional defense environment.
Thanks very much, Rupert. Jonathan?
Yeah, from our side, we look at the defense and intelligence organizations that are driving the market. So what we see is, first of all, the end user. That's where it starts. Bringing value to the end users, innovate. So, and I think there are many innovators out there, also with the clients, by the way. So I think for us, it's also a teaming perspective. We team up with the end users, trying to understand, okay, where can we innovate, where can we be bolder? And that's, for example, how the 10 minutes came up. So that's an actual client who said, okay, this is what I want. Challenge accepted, yes or no. So that's the first one, innovate. But the second part is be able to scale it, because that's the business side of things, I think. So be competitive, not only at the local market, not only European market, but at a global stage. And I think that's really the hard part, to be competitive at the global stage. And how we look at it is really execution. So Blacksky has always been focused on the defense and intelligence market. We've always looked at how can we solve those problems, and we're executing on a daily basis. So turn that vision, turn that innovation into a real product, And that's, I think, a key to having the revenue to attract new investors and etc. Because the market is growing, I think. I've been told by my team it's 5 billion right now. EO market will grow into 8 billion in 33. So I think if you have the right product, if you're competitive and you have a close relationship with your end users, I think that will solve a lot.
Thanks very much. Laryssa, over to you. What do we need to do for you to be confident in us, and how can you help us grow and thrive to give you those products?
So I think the first thing as NATO I need to manage is expectations. We do not have a golden credit card. No. So we are also constrained. One of the biggest things that helps is to communicate, what is the product and what is the added value. There is a lot of senior leadership that are learning about space. We call it, raising the space IQ at NATO. So one of the things that you could help with is to understand that we are coming from a position where the senior leaders are tackling all sorts of problems. They are looking at, defense across the board, not just space. And although I live and breathe space, as it says in my title, I am speaking with leaders who are dealing with all different aspects of defense. And what we need to do is understand that they are covering a huge range of topics, and we need to explain what the value added and the products and the benefits of space are. And the more we explain this in a realistic way, the better. And the last thing I would ask is be careful when you overpromise. Because if you say, I can do 10 minutes, and then it's, oh yeah, but only when I get my constellation up is it going to be 10 minutes, then please don't sell me 10 minutes. It is a difficult thing to walk back. So the more realistic the offering is, the easier it is to push it down the line. And then the last thing is be patient with us. Defense organizations are slow. We in NATO have 32 nations that we are accountable to, and that decision process takes time. So we try to accelerate as much as possible. We have a lot of agile initiatives, but in the end, it takes time to do things, and we cannot be as fast as a commercial entity.
I think those are really wise words. So I just want to pick up just a couple of thoughts to sort of re-emphasize them. Jonathan's point about knowing what you've got in terms of capabilities and making sure you can span across different areas with something you have, and he used an example which we also can do, which is about moisture content in fields, which farmers are very interested in. They're really worried about moisture content in fields. I don't know if we've got any retired or even current tank commanders in the field, but tank commanders are very worried about moisture in fields as well, as to whether they can drive their tracked vehicles over a field. Soldiers worry about whether they're ankle deep in water in trenches, and they make a better enemy if they're warm and dry, or a worse enemy, if you like, when they're warm and dry than soaking wet. So these things are all important, and sometimes things that you gather from one area come to another. And then if I can follow up on Laryssa's point, in a previous life I was trying to market to defence a product that wasn't quite in space, and I used to describe it as my stickless, plateless plate spinning act, for those of you who've seen that in a circus, and you really can't do it. The defence customer, I think, doesn't generally buy off plan. They want proof, they want something that works, and they want it as soon as they can. And I think it's really important what you have to say of not promising.
Peter, perhaps.
Go ahead.
We see also a change on that front, because so the 10 minutes, for example, it's not existing today. But we have a customer who basically said, we believe in Blacksky, we believe in the requirements, and we've put down a whole program to work towards it. I think it was just 2 weeks ago we announced also with India a partnership. So I would say that mindset is also shifting into we see commercial as a real long-time partner to work together and with very specific requirements. So perhaps they're not existing yet, but this is what we can do. And this is what we can do for a very specific sets of requirements. So I see that as well, that shifting as well.
Yeah. I think the partner words come out a lot. Laryssa,
I fully agree. I think we rely on industry to push the limit of what is possible. And it's industry to innovate. and to find the funding for that innovation and to push the limit to 10 minutes. But it's important that industry does that, because as NATO, we will not launch 35 satellites to get to 10 minutes. That's not in our scope of work. What we will do is come to you and say, can you provide this with this 10-minute window? So that innovation that you provide is tremendous, and it's important to educate us about these new products and new capabilities, and then that allows us to be better.
Yeah, it's partnership, trust, isn't it? That's what it's all about. We have more questions. I have them down here, but I just wanted to take a moment, as we've sort of got deeply there into EO, and I can't see you as well as you can see us, I assure you, to see if we had a question or two from the audience. And I see a hand leap up. Do we have a... Come on. Please, if you could tell us who you are and who you're from, that would be helpful.
Yeah, hello. It's me again, Sasha Toll. But this question that I am asking now to Laryssa Patten is more just about me, because I'm very passionate about this topic. Earlier, you were saying that critical information or private information would something that you would find that very interesting to outsource that to a company that would do this. I do not think that this is really a good idea, but I can maybe understand why you said it, but I would just hear from you, why do you think that this is so interesting to outsource such critical information to a company? Because we all know companies get implemented, then they have a right setup, and at some point maybe they hand it over to whoever.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think my comment is about how secret or how classified is this information. I have no doubt that the Sevastopol area is imaged every day, and it's not because NATO is asking for it. So my point on that is, let's be more realistic. That a lot of this that is being asked, and the imagery is every day or every hour or every 10 minutes, we cannot process all that. But there are targets and areas of interest that are known. And let's not pretend that these are not asked about. So that type of information is what I'm talking about. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Jonathan.
Yeah, perhaps to add as well is, what you need to understand as well is there's a limit to the human workforce. So what we're seeing with our end users, and that's at strategic level, but even more at operational and tactical level. Even at strategic level, you have, I would say, the classical end users, well-trained, have all the systems in place. But now with getting more and more data, the operational and the tactical user is also getting all that intelligence. But they don't have the workforce right now to do the interpretation or do the analysis of it. So there's a huge bottleneck on that part, and that's where I see that, first of all, analytics can play a huge role, but as well the systems to have cooperations with companies who are providing very specific intelligence reports. So, and it's as Laryssa is saying, there's a shift because perhaps what used to be classified is now very well known. I think I'm now 10 years in the industry, and back then it was very hard to have commercial imagery. I think there were a couple of providers, but now, well, I would not say you can go on your phone and task a satellite, but that's where we are right now. So the whole industry has shifted, and what we are seeing right now is there are bottlenecks, there are operational questions, and we can solve them for our customers. So I think that's from big importance, and that's how we build trust as well, because that's a key factor, trust.
Rupert.
Yeah, I think we just have to be very clear that we're not providing the decision, we're providing the open data. And what our customers do with that data is up to them. And also, it probably is not the authoritative data that they commit a decision on. Our data probably tips or cues other assets to support their decision-making cycle. So there are layers of redundancy in the provision of open data to customers.
But when it comes then to the situation, about just because of a financial discussion, that then the company decides to hand it over to someone because this company can then get more money. Who would then decide or decide, no, you can't do this? This is forbidden.
I think you, if I may, I think what you're probably starting to drift into is the depths of licensing, who owns the data, who they can give it away to. Because you know, if you have your car serviced by a garage, they don't own the car. You know, it's your data, and part of the setup would be setting up that this organization, the company, has to operate with the data within the bounds of the law, protect it in a suitable way, have the systems in place to protect it in a suitable way, and certainly would not be in a position to sell that data, you know, just because, you know, they chose to. And we already have many, many companies working in extremely classified areas who are trusted sharers.
Yeah, just to give you perhaps a very practical example is in our system, you can task a satellite, but our end user can choose if they want to withhold imagery from the archive permanently or for 30 days. So if they do a tasking and they say, no, nobody can see it, you can just click the button and nobody will see it.
I also want to add that APSS has a commercial provider side, and it also has national classified satellites. So any sensitive information has gone through the classified side, and it is not put onto the commercial satellite market.
Excellent, good questioning, sir. Do we have another question from the floor before I give them a tricky question? Oh, yeah, please, over here. Sorry, I can't see you, so if I just point generally.
Jacques Rousseau, I'm with TÜVIT. TÜVIT runs a cyber lab. I have a question on this classified information when it comes to cybersecurity. We have the same discussions with governments. If 85%, or if we could you imagine that we could agree on 85% of the cybersecurity requirements from a governmental perspective and from a defense perspective, and then add something on top, whatever every nation wants, that would give us the chance to generate a market within the defense and governmental sector, because also the governments need to ramp up in cybersecurity. Would that be a possible way forward? That would reduce the necessity of classified information, right? For 85%.
So I cannot answer that. It has too many hypotheticals. I don't understand how far the security standards go into the supply chain of the particular provider. So I think it's worth another panel to discuss, you know, how we address these issues. But just right off answering, I think there's too much unknown in what you mean by agreeing on 85% of the security standards. Is it something we need to address? Absolutely. Are there companies that are working on it? Absolutely. But we need to address it more thoroughly. And hypothetically, I just can't answer, sorry.
Yeah. I'm just going to move on to another question, but I think the issues of security standards, licensing, cyber protection are all absolutely critical issues, and we could fill an entire panel on it. So I'm going to move on now to another question I'm going to ask the panel, and I'm going to get Laryssa to talk about this first, because this question's her fault, so why not? But it's a brilliant one. What are the commercial satellite operators, what are we, doing to protect our satellites from the ever-increasing threats, both to the ground and the space segment? We heard Clinton Clark. I hope you're all in the room for that fantastic presentation. It's real. The threats are there. Laryssa, do you want to expand maybe a little bit on the threats as you see them, and then I can go to the operators.
So I admit this question is my fault, but it was supposed to go to industry.
Well, I'll let you tell us what the risks are first.
So there are the classic risks that I think all of us in the room know, ASATs, all that stuff. But the reason I brought this up is I sent Peter the picture of the Sentinel-1 satellite that had some strange markings over a certain area of Sevastopol. And so the discussion was, is this jamming of the SAR satellite? And that is what I brought forward to Peter. I don't know if they have the picture. So there is a lot of question in the industry. there's questions of what is this? Is it just ground interference or is it deliberate? So I was saying I would like to know from the industry side, what you're doing to prevent these kind of examples. And I used the Sentinel one because it's a European Space Agency satellite that is, and the example is in the news, so we can just have an unclassified one. But my question was to industry, not to me.
No, I was going to ask you the question.
Given things like this are happening, and the discussion is it deliberate? Are you looking at things like, turning your satellite, or looking to NATO to give you a response of potential, activities? Are you talking to each other about, well, last time I flew over this one, or, or is there anything that is happening on your side?
I'll take a stab at that. So I'm not privy to any discussions going on between industry about shared threats or shared risks, but we obviously do speak to our customers when we know there's a risk coming up to the provision of service or when they think there's one as well. So that those conversations do happen. I think Planet's in a rather unique position in terms of the way that we look at threat. We operate the largest constellation of satellites, I think, of any provider. We also have multiple ground stations connecting the satellites. So really our risk reduction is in the mass of equipment that we've got up in space. So theoretically, you could take out 30% of our satellites, say, but you're still going to get 90% of our coverage. Also, our satellites tend to be very cheap and very deployable, so we can easily replace our satellites as well. And then looking to the future and thinking about communication interruption, I think fitting out a fleet of, or a large constellation with free space optical comms and trying to get data off the radio bands is probably the way to go, and that's certainly something that Planet is looking at.
Thanks, Rupert. Jonathan?
I would say as well, so we have a full team working on that internally. I will not go into the details, but I would say it's same as my colleague is saying, different ground stations, different ways. We have, right now we're looking to have a satellite fleet of 28 by 27. But also, I think important is the way you are able to, perhaps, if there's such a threat, and it happens, is how quick can you be operational again? And so, in the past, we have done, in 1 month, 3 launches from 2 different continents with Rocket Lab, so that was pretty fast. But as well, you might imagine, we did a launch with our Gen 2, and so the launch happened, and basically in less than 12 hours, we had already our imagery, first imagery in. So it's about having also an automated workflow, I would not say being the Henry Ford of production and satellites, but I think that's definitely also a case that we can discuss publicly.
Yeah, and I suppose I can't hide from answering a question like that, but it's a similar answer by using multiple satellites. In our case, doing very similar things, and we work on the principle that every satellite pass, we've got another satellite right behind it. Clearly, I think we'd all agree, very high levels of encryption on the ground segment to protect that from cyber and so on. But I'm very mindful that there are vulnerabilities you can't get away from. Ground stations are vulnerable, so we use multiple ground stations. We have the ability to use bespoke and ground stations that are put in specifically and quickly. But in the end, I think it's probably fair to say, and forgive me if you don't agree, but the commercial space sector cannot protect itself at the level the military space sector does, and keep costs anywhere within the bounds that would make it work for us. Rupert?
And probably also in the fact that we are a civilian entity operating in the civilian environment, I think there's a whole load of risks that are probably unique to us that the military don't have. Yeah. So coercion or influence of individual actors in the commercial space sector as well. So there are risks that are probably beyond, I think, the scope of the military that civilian companies have to think about, and we do think about them.
And I think all that says that the sector will always be a mix of both. You can never have just one. Okay, so we have 5 minutes or so left. I've got one killer question for them to all answer, but just before we go for that, do we have another question? I can't see, but the microphone's running out there, so I suspect it's going. Please.
Thank you all. Charles Dandinier from Telespazio, France. I have a question for you. Do you think a client will prefer in the future to have directly the analytics or the photo, or will they still want the photo? Thanks.
I think it will depend on the end user. So, for example, what we have seen with specific contracts is that the output that they wanted was specific data, basically a CSV file. But we always have the imagery in the background. So if they say, okay, we want to see the imagery to do a quality assurance, for example, that's possible. So I think it will be a mix of both. So the data is still there. It's a ground truth. It's important to have it. It's also important to build the trust. So, because some things concerning analytics, you need to have also a close engagement with the end user. So they need to understand what can you do with the analytics, what can't you do. So that's only by having very specific objects in mind. So we're right now developing multiple, I would say, object detections for 35 centimeter. And you need to have a F1 score, as we call it. So the F1 score, you can say, okay, this is the F1 score. These objects are good. These objects are not that good. So in the whole end, and that's what Rupert was also saying, it's about the decision-making process. So you need to be able to give the client a good idea, okay, how do I evaluate this source? Is it the data? Is it the analytic? So how trustworthy is it? So, and I think that's by having the close relationship with the end user and giving them the right information on what is actually true and what is not true.
I can't see another hand. So just before I go to the last question, just to follow up on a couple of things we've heard. I think we've heard the word partnership used a lot, the partnership between the users and between the providers, very important. And the second is I want to reiterate, for those of you who were in here and heard Geoffroy Baudin speak earlier, he talked about the importance of training, and we've heard about the importance of the end user. And this follows on from Laryssa's point, which was so good, which is there are people who are using space products who don't know very much about space. It is our job to provide them with the material, and I use that word very carefully, they need to do their jobs and not have to worry too much about where it came from. Maybe they need to know a little of the limitations, a little of the risks, but they need to be given a product that they can use, and it's our job to convert that, what we do, that's so complicated, it is rocket science, into something that's usable, and that could be from anybody from a general to a soldier in a trench on the ground. So we do have just 2 minutes left, so one question then, and it's quite, don't worry, don't look at me like that, you're looking terribly worried. It's very simple really, which is for each of you perhaps, if you could give us just one emerging trend that really interests you at the moment and you feel perhaps we should be doing something about. Laryssa, are you okay to go first on that?
Well, I started with trends, but if I have to pick, I'd like to pick two, just to negotiate the question. I think the tipping and queuing with wide scanning satellites tipping to high resolution satellites is very interesting for us right now. We don't have the capacity to review all the data from the whole Earth or from the whole AOR, and it's very interesting if that is more advanced. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the business model, that more and more we want to have a relationship with industry, not to just receive a product. But we mentioned TAC SRT. They do a fantastic job of helping industry get better. And I would like to see more of that kind of approach with NATO. So those are the two things. I know you said one, but sorry.
No, that's great.
But those are the two things, one technology and one relationship change.
Lovely. Thank you. Rupert.
Yeah, thank you. That's there's about 15,000 new trends, I think, that I'm interested in. But what I would say is that if sort of NATO-affiliated commercial entities and countries are able to do wide area monitoring on a daily basis of potentially enemy countries, what are they doing to us? We know that the Chinese have launched a large constellation of satellites, much in the same way as Planet, and are able to do that same sort of monitoring, albeit at a small area and a lower latency. How is that going to change our posture in the military? How are we going to utilize the assets that we've already got to do counter-threat profiling?
Lovely. Jonathan?
I think for me, and that's also the reason why I joined Blacksky almost 3 years ago, is to have that speed of delivery and the latency, because that will change the game not only at the strategic level, but also providing a warfighter in theater at the operational level and the tactical level. So I think that's for me the main trend, and there's a lot of work to do because those are new end users, so there's a lot of awareness ongoing, a lot of training ongoing, but that's what I'm passionate about.
Great, well, thank you very much. So automated tip and queue, good business models. Don't forget, we're being watched. It's not just us watching them. Get that latency low. I think we all agreed every day, everywhere, as many places as you possibly can look at once. Laryssa, Rupert, Jonathan, thank you very much. If you could all say thank you to a wonderful panel.